Yeah. Well, the people affected by this bill were promised a brighter future. They were promised a brighter future by that government, and instead they've got no jobs and they've got this bill instead. And how is that the brighter future that they were promised? Well, quite simply, it's not the brighter future, because that government got it wrong. They sold the electorate a line, and now they can't actually deliver. And they can't deliver because they have no plan to create the jobs, and instead they're going to target those very people who they have put on the scrap heap. They are targeting them with this bill, and they have got it very, very wrong. But Mr Chair, I want to speak about an issue that hasn't been well traversed yet in this debate, and that is the issue about childcare. Because it all started here with this bill. It all started. This was the first time that we learned that this government was completely insincere when it said that childcare and early childhood education was a top priority. And this bill was the first indication when we knew in writing that that was insincere. Because in this very bill, they have cut $57 million and transferred that cost onto families for childcare. $57 million affecting 11,000 families. And at that point, it was called the Future Focus Bill. Well, the future focus for those 11,000 families was that they were going to be out of pocket to the collective tune of $57 million. And the Treasury said, well, that's just the government transferring the cost onto parents. Well, it's transferring the cost onto parents, all right. And it's transferring the cost onto parents who cannot afford that. They can't afford the increase in GST that's coming up. They cannot afford this $57 million, and they certainly cannot afford then the additional $295 million that this government is cutting out of early childhood education and putting on those very same families as well. Brighter future? I don't think so. This is absolutely not the brighter future. And the ministry actually jumped the gun on this one too, because here we are still in the committee stages of this very bill, and yet way back in April, the Ministry of Social Development actually posted on the website to tell the early childhood education sector how much it was going to have to adjust its funding by. So we still haven't even passed this bill in this Parliament, and way back in April, the sector was being informed officially by the Ministry of Education, $57 million is coming out, folks, and you better find a way to replace it. They were already informing, and in fact, I just met with an early childhood education person last week who had a visit from the ministry to sit down with them and go through the figures, again, for this particular cut, this $57 million, because the childcare subsidy, what the sector refers to as the WINS subsidy, even though it's been called working income for some time now, but it's commonly referred to as the WINS subsidy in the sector, that's been cut, and ministry officials, even though this bill hasn't even been passed, are going around the country as we speak, working through the details with owners of childcare centres and early childhood education facilities to tell them exactly what that cut's going to look like and try and help them manage them through it. Mind you, I'd have to say that's a little bit better than the Ministry of Education, who is completely keeping arm's length from those very same providers and pretending they have nothing to do with the $295 million that is coming out of that sector because of the funding cuts that were made out of Vote Education at the same time. But Mr Chair, it is the cumulative effect of the things that this bill does with not only early childhood education but also out-of-school care. Because this cut in subsidies, the childcare subsidy, also applies for children up to the age of 13, whose families access those subsidies to keep them in out-of-school care. And why do they need that out-of-school care subsidy? Because by and large it's because those parents are working. They are doing what the government pretends it wants them to do. They are in paid employment, and they're trying to keep their children safe while in a safe environment while they are in paid employment. And what does this government do for that brighter future for those families? It cuts the subsidy and reduces the income thresholds that the subsidy applies to. And of course, they have no brighter future. And what about women? because women are unfairly targeted once again by this.